Welcome to the 300 After Hours. This is where we continue the conversation that was started earlier tonight in our Young Adult Weekly Bible study. And tonight we have Isaac here with us. Thank you, Isaac, for joining us tonight. We'll hear from Isaac and get his thoughts on tonight's verse. Again, we're in Galatians right now, and tonight we covered verses 8 and 9. So I'm going to go ahead and read our verses, Isaac, and then I just want to know maybe what stood out to you, or maybe even something that you guys talked about at your table that seems significant from these verses. So the verses are Galatians 1, beginning in verse 8. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed. Of course, Paul is continuing down this line. He's talking with them, and he's revealed that people are coming into their community, false teachers, and presenting a different gospel. And that's where he picks up here and says, even if we are an angel should preach to you a different gospel, let him be accursed. So that's those were our verses tonight. Isaac, did anything stand out to you, or was there something that was meaningful or interesting that you guys talked about at your table?
I think what stuck out the most and what I'll likely keep with me as I go about my week and just the rest of my night is something you said actually on stage, which is that it's not the messenger that validates the message, but the message that validates the messenger. And just kind of the idea that it's not as important as who's saying what. It's the substance that matters. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I don't know, just looking at like today, I have a lot of obviously young friends, my age group, and I speak to a lot of like high school students as well in the youth ministry. And oftentimes I'll hear them say like, oh, like this is a good teacher. Like, you know, when I heard this message, like it really touched me and like I felt that. And it's like, oh, you should give this guy a listen. Like he's really good. Mm-hmm. But I think when you bring in the idea that what matters is the message itself, and not even like where it's coming from or how it's being said, I guess in the degree of like the trust and the brilliance, which you talked about tonight, it kind of shifts it from like, oh, this is a good like teacher bringing like a good message, to saying, oh no, this is sound. Like this is a sound teacher with a sound message. It's shifting the perspective from like how it makes you feel and what you're going away with into something that you're saying, oh, I can stand on this, I guess. It's kind of shifting that perspective from feelings and this kind of like light things that we like to, I don't know, we kind of feel good, right? Yeah. Feeling good, talk about, but also receiving, to like what we're actually going to live and walk out.
Right.
And just kind of like the substance of the gospel, because when the gospel is really presented, like it doesn't matter who's saying it, that is something that you feel. But more than feel, it's something you can say yes. Like, yes, I can stand on that. Mm-hmm. And that's like, I don't know, that shift, I guess, from, yeah, this is good, and I can kind of go pumped, but like, no, like this is like, yeah, this is the truth I need to walk out.
Yeah, I love that. And when you talk about like, when you just like with your peers, and if you have peers that are coming up to you and saying, well, this is a good teacher, or this is a good message or something, when they say good, what are they generally talking? I mean, you alluded to this, but what does that typically mean when you go and look at what they're telling you to listen to? What constitutes good generally?
Typically, it'll be something that is easily understood, so very swallowable, I guess, digestible, but also has a very encouraging or empowering message.
Yeah, so it's something you feel encouraged by. Mm-hmm. So the person is good at motivating and encouraging you, and they're usually gifted as speakers.
Yeah,
right? They're easy to listen to, right? Yeah, I mean, I think that's often what we say is good. But I like what you were saying there, that there's a difference between that and what did you say? Did you say meaningful or
sound?
What? Sound. Yeah, sound. There's a difference between good and sound. I love that. I love the way that you put that. And when you say that, I think about, when it comes down to the gospel, Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for the gospel is the power of God. And ultimately, in our life, I mean, as a young adult, do I need encouragement and motivation, or do I need the power of God, right?
Yeah.
And so that is really neat to put it in, is it good or is it like sound? Because sound means that I'm introducing the power of God into my life and nothing less, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's neat. That's neat. Anything else that stood out to you through your discussions tonight?
Nothing in particular that comes to mind.
Okay, we talked a little bit about. Let's focus on, like Paul does mention. He says, even if we or an angel. Why is he using himself or an angel as an example there? We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about kind of the hyperbolic sense, the extremes, right? Someone who's, if they tell you a truth, then it would make sense that they could amend that truth. But Paul's saying, no, not even someone that, like me being the one that told you. It doesn't matter how trustworthy you think that source is. If it's not the true gospel, then it should be thrown out.
Yeah.
And then with the angels bringing in kind of like that whole messenger validating the message kind of thing.
Yeah, what you were talking
like the
about.
Brilliance and like, it's just like there's bringing more than what actually matters, which is it true?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. He's really saying exactly what you're saying there. Even if it's me, I mean, if anyone could change the gospel message that had been delivered to them, it would be Paul, the one that delivered it to them. But even if the person appears trustworthy, even if it's comes with the brilliance of an angel, that again, as you were saying, Isaac, that the message validates the messenger. The messenger doesn't validate the message. So I think that's a good truth. Let me just go and just skip to kind of one of the things that we talked about right at the end and is really important, probably especially for your generation that grew up with a cell phone in your hand. We can be fairly safe and sound in terms of what we allow, what kind of religious teaching or spiritual teaching that can come into our life, but we can also leave other areas of our life open to half-truths and lies, right? Do you think that that's a pretty big problem with your generation, your peers?
I think I would say it definitely is. Probably half the conversations I have start with someone saying, on this podcast I heard.
Right.
And so there certainly is just outrageous amounts of just information that people are just kind of soaking up. There's oftentimes not kind of like that, hold up, let me take a step back and filter this. Oftentimes that's kind of like, it's on the back burner because it's just the next thing after the next thing after the next thing. And if that's how you're consuming information, well, there really isn't time to say, well, is this sound? It's just kind of, that was kind of good. That's going to stick with me for the rest of the day. It's like, well, should it? So,
how do you think typically, like, there was a huge change when you look at like how things develop, someone that's a little bit older like me, when you go from a time when the internet was barely in its beginning stages, and there was a time when it was amazing that you could download stuff off the internet. Then what really made the change is when you can easily upload stuff. When there was places where you could upload your videos and have podcasts, there was a dramatic change just in the way that we think about things. It created almost like a credibility simply because it's there on the internet, right? There's a credibility just because it exists. And prior to that, you actually had to have something to say, and it had to be fact-checked before it could be published and everything like that. How did your generation, how do your peers determine like what is credible to listen to? I mean, is that a problem, or is there kind of just a perceived, if it was on a YouTube channel, it's likely to be true?
I think, I don't know. I think to a degree, when I look at my generation, it's oftentimes just kind of like assumed that if I'm hearing it, then like it's something that deserves to be heard. Like if it made it to my For You page, then obviously people agreed and liked this, so then I should agree and like this. I think there's a lot of assumption that if it's here, then it's good. Obviously people are like, okay, that the only reason that's popular is because it's so bad and outrageous. But oftentimes that just gets, I think it's quickly overlooked. And I think a major example comes to my mind, which when I heard it, I thought was just, it blew my mind. And it was a so-called pastor who has a very big following on TikTok. preaching that when Jesus called Lazarus out of the tomb, he was actually calling Lazarus out of the closet, and that he was actually gay. And I was in high school at the time, and one of my peers was like, hey, this seems kind of weird. Like, I've been listening to his other stuff, and I thought it was really good. It made me feel good, and it was just really encouraging and like super loving. But this one's kind of like, I don't know. He's saying like Lazarus was gay. Like, I don't see that. And so it was kind of scary to me to see that like they were following that teacher for so long, and it took something that was just that outrageous for them to start to question it. So it kind of makes you question like, well, what have you been just kind of accepting? That was just kind of like that half truth, like you said, which is even more dangerous than that blatant lie.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully there is, I think that because there's more and more content out there, I think there probably is a healthy maybe skepticism that's beginning to grow within people's minds, that maybe we do have to, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. And so that's, hopefully that is out there. But, well, I think that's probably the takeaway from a text like this, Isaac, is that we judge it. We judge what comes into our life, whether it's from the pulpit or from the world. We're going to judge. We're going to let the standard be the truth, right? The gospel, and not the messenger and how brilliant or trustworthy they are, but really the message itself, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good take home. Thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week at the same time. God bless.
God bless.